Joseph Smith, even if he copied it straight from the New Testament, it needs to be in there because wherever it came from, it establishes the covenant. It's not some random Isaiah, like Isaiah's just like, hey, let me just do some parallelism. Like he's like, no, this is the covenant. I am real. I am a God that don't leave his people hanging. And the ultimate end, we live in a world where people have choices, but no matter what, I save my people. I redeem my people. I come back for my people. In the third and fourth generation, I will come back. It's the greatest love story of all time.
Today we have Stephen Jones in the house, in the studio. And welcome, Stephen. Thanks for coming.
Hey, good to be here, man.
We are going to talk about race as it pertains to the temple and priesthood ban.
You already seem so delicate about it. Like, okay, not that you shouldn't. I'm just saying. I'm just putting. I'm just trying to lighten it up a little bit.
Thanks.
Like literally in the holding of your hand, you're like, no. Yeah, but for real though, this is something that's kind of sensitive to a lot of people. I mean, I respect that you are doing that. I just, the delicacy of the hands, like, yeah. Anyway.
Well, cool. I love it. Where was I? Temple. So there's the temple ban, priesthood ban.
Yeah.
And kind of the racial history that has been in the church, from about 1852 to 1978. Okay. There are a lot of great sources. Maybe we'll put them in the descriptions. There's Darius Gray, Marvin Perkins, W. Paul Reeve.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of others that we can put in there. But we're going to try to talk about it today, Stephen. And I'm glad I have you as a guest.
So I want to be clear. Like, I'm not an expert. We know each other. I just have a perspective that I think could be useful. And it may be things that people agree with. Maybe they don't agree with them. But hopefully we can have something that can be beneficial to somebody. There's got to be somebody out there that we can connect with and, just from our personal experiences. That's what I thought.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I'm really excited to have you on and talk about it.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've sort of known about it my whole life, but only within the past few years when this sort of faith crisis or faith adventure started is when I started paying more attention to it and actually looking at it and actually trying to feel it, right? And within that, you start looking, at least me, I started looking at some history and some statements made by some prophets and some people's stories in that time period that were faithful Latter-day Saints that couldn't go to the temple, couldn't receive the priesthood. And it just hurt. Like, it hurt more than anything else. And I feel like that's when I started to call Mayday. That's when my plane started going down. And not to say that it was going perfectly, because at that time I had been really spotty going to church for a while. I mean, I think I told you once that me and my wife would just go to church, and sometimes we'd get there about right on time. And so only the seats in the very, very front, the pews, yeah. We'd sit right behind the deacons.
You're like walking in like 8 seconds.
And we'd sit down, and this was the time before the pandemic, so they'd do the sacrament first. Yeah. Right now it's a little tough because they do it at the end. You can't just, anyway. And we'd take the sacrament, and then once they'd, conclude the sacrament and start with the talks section of the sacrament meeting, we'd just like get up and bow out of there. Anyway, and that had been going on, and I had kind of started, I don't know about lose faith, but maybe a little bit of loss of faith and a loss of trust, a loss of belief, a loss of fervor and excitement in the gospel. And then, about a year or so, and then just, not too long ago I started to really get affected by this.
So I'm not trying to interrupt. Like, this was the catalyst one for you.
I think
like
so.
You had a lot, like, I'm making sure that's clear for me. Like, there was a lot of things that had been happening. And then when you kind of learned more about it, was it because you mentioned quotes? Was it like a specific one?
Yeah, there were some first presidency like declarations or statements made in like I think it was the 1930s or 40s concerning the Negroes' spot in the church and And it just hurt because it felt like it was a declaration of doctrine of God, not man. This was God's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't so much as, oh, I have a problem with the prophets. I have a problem with any leaders of the church. I was like, wow, God really did this? Could God do this? Why did God allow it if it wasn't him? Why is it saying it's man-made or why is it saying that it's God-made, not man-made, and we're just instruments in his hands when it feels like I don't believe in a God like that.
Yeah.
So maybe I was having this dissonance where I didn't know what to believe, and I was struggling in this space. So anyway, and so that's.
Do you remember like when it was, like what it was like overall, like?
Yeah, I do.
Was it like a day? Was it like a day?
I was laying in my bed on a Sunday.
And I'm not laughing at you. I just love how you like said it. You're like, anyway, sorry.
In my bed on a Sunday, and the sun was coming through. It was in July of all days. Beautiful day, right? I remember everything about that moment. And I feel like I just started to be sucked into this black hole because it was something I had never confronted before, ever, or felt. And
so that's what I'm saying. Like, cause for me, I think that obviously, like, well, obviously is not the best word, but like the conversation that we're having right now, like, cause I think that the representation of you, there's a lot of people, cause you almost assume a lot of times, maybe people do that, like, if you're not like, you know, cause I happen to be black and white. So my mom's white, my dad's black. Right. And you're Caucasian, white, whatever we want to call it. Right. And so, but like, it's almost like an issue that like you could say like, oh, it can only affect black people. And so I think that's just interesting overall. Not that it should or shouldn't be that way for you, but I think that like, I'm just curious about like, cause I've heard lately that there's like an unmet need usually that's associated with a lot of things. Like, what do you think it was that was like, if it were to be like a gap, like what would be the thing that like created the gap for you? Not that it's, you know, some people might think that that's an obvious question, right? But like for you, what do you think it was?
Good question.
You know what I'm saying?
I like to think of some
because I got things that I've thought about and it's questions that I've had. You know, I'm just curious from you because, you know, from a person who's Caucasian, right? I think that's an important question to ask. I'm just curious. I'm just curious.
So you're saying, Jake, you're white. Why do you care?
That's not what I'm saying. No. That's not what I think that I think people watching this might be thinking like, hold up, like he's black and he's white, right? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be having anything,
right?
But I'm saying like I'm interested to know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I know you weren't asking that. I just thought I'd joke around a little bit.
Like just get to the chase. No, but somebody was thinking it, right?
Yes, thank you.
You know
now, yeah. Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know because I want to think of some of the feelings that I've had throughout. And I don't know if I can attribute it specifically to this. But did I feel some sort of betrayal because I feel like it wasn't talked about enough or taught to me enough? Was it feeling sadness in a God who I thought this is the character of God, and then coming across things that threatened that belief of a God who I thought I believed in and loved?
So there was like a disconnect.
I think, disconnect. I don't know. There have been other things that felt sort of like a betrayal, sort of. Not really. Feeling lied or deceived to. I know those are big things that I see when people leave the church. They say, I've been lied and deceived to, and I'm done. And I felt a little bit of that. I don't know if it was specific to the race and the priest. I think it just had that disconnect with a God who I had like a foundational belief in. And that foundation seemed to sort of slip a little bit.
It wasn't compatible. It was different than what you were thinking. Yeah.
It was different. And it just made me sad. It made me so incredibly sad. And it felt, and then of course, everything starts to fall. And we've done many episodes talking about many different issues. And it mainly came down to why do I want to believe in a God or trust his servants if I don't feel like what am I trying to say?
I think it's good. So you're saying like if you don't feel like if the God that I know, that doesn't seem like that's him. It's kind of what you're saying,
Right? Yeah,
Huh.
a little bit.
Okay.
It just hurt. It hurt, and I feel a little like I shouldn't feel hurt as well, because I was born white with all the privilege in the world, and why am I feeling this hurt? And so what I think it is just my beliefs and my thoughts of what God are not compatible with
what you're seeing,
what I'm seeing, and with not a lot of the teachings changed, not a lot of the culture traditions changed. It's as if the band still exists and it's still alive and active today. And I remember growing up and hearing about race and Cain's mark, right? The curse of Cain. And I wasn't exactly hearing it or being taught by it in the light of, this is wrong, we don't believe this.
So just like, yeah, that's what it is. And there was no like, correction of it.
No correction. And it's probably still a sort of a real thing.
You know what's interesting? I was talking to my friend yesterday, because like COVID-19 has like really like just stirred up a whole bunch of stuff. And not even just with race, but I'm saying like in the world, like the election, there was so many like conspiracy theories. There's so many things that were going on. And it really made me think like, is it really that like we want to know, And so for me personally, I find myself trying to be like, I want to make sense of something. So I got to come up with something. You know what I mean? I want to come to some type of conclusion. I want to come up with some type of answer. You know what I mean? And so then I start to like come up with ideas, and it's not that I'm saying that like, I don't know if that makes any sense. Does that even make any sense? Like, it's easy for me to like, I want to come up with an answer. Like the idea though is like, life is so complex, like really, really complex in every aspect, in every way. You know what I mean? And it's like, when I come with questions like this, like for me personally, I want to just be able to be like, this is like, you know what? I figured it out. That's what it is. It's this, it's that, boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean? And then for me, it's like, if I like, it makes me to be able to cope with it for the good or for the bad, I just think it's interesting that you're saying that, because like,
us millennials just have to know everything.
Well, no, I think it's fine to want to know. I think that it's fine to want to know. I'm saying that like,
I'm just joking.
For me personally, like it made me realize like for me that I like, nope, that's the reason, it's that thing, and the reality is like human, like it's made me like, the longer I'm living, the more like complex I realize that life really is, you know what I'm saying? And so I don't know, man, because I've thought about this stuff, a lot of stuff like this too, a lot. And like, because from the South, right? Like my dad, like he married my mom when he was in 1979. Like this is back when like, because I think about how like me growing up in the South, like racism was real, man. Like people, I remember there was a girl when I was 15 and I would, and she was white and I was like, my mom was white. And so I really liked her a lot. And like, we were like really, really, we just, we thought we were in love, you know what I mean? Right. And so like, I would call her dad would be like, are you talking to that? You know what I mean? Like I'm saying like, this was just life, you know what I mean? And it doesn't excuse what he's saying. I'm just saying that like racism to me, like against me, I've experienced it. Like my mom was white and I'm in the grocery store and there's like 5 kids that are chocolate, right? Like that are like my skin, right? And and people are pointing at like every time, like when I was going to school, like people would be like, hey, Steven, like if my mom, she worked at the same school as me. And so she would leave the house. I know she wouldn't leave the house. What am I talking about? She would like leave the room when they like, she would come in and like, I forgot my lunch or like my whatever. And she'd come into my classroom and then she would leave. And then I could like count down like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then boom, right on cue. They'd be like, hey, are you adopted? And I'm like, no, I'm not adopted. Like, come on, like biology, like I know she's white. You know what I'm saying? So like there would be just encounters that I would have. And so the reality of just racial things, period, already existed for me. You know what I mean? And like, especially in the South, like my dad would like, when he was dating my mom, like people would, my dad was like, he always jokes around about it, but like in all seriousness, people would constantly be coming at him, like about like him being with my mom. And my dad was like this, like 6, I think he was like 5'6", like big dude. Like he worked out, he bench pressed 475 and like mean. He was like, well, he always jokes about how he was so mean before he like joined the church, but he would beat people up. Somebody like my dad, when he was, he would get fired after people like my mom would drop him off. And sometimes they'd be like, no, don't drop me off. And then she would drop him off at work, and they would see that my mom was white. The next day they would fire my dad. So what I'm saying is, I'm just like, to me, it's just interesting from my perspective of like, I'm like, yeah, it exists. You know what I mean? Like racism is real, you know? And for people to say that it's not real, I mean, that's just like biases of any sort, racism or whatever, they exist, period. And they've existed for a long time. So it's just interesting when you go back to church history, like for me, it's just, I can see that it existed back then because it existed now. You know what I mean? Like this is like 2021. That was like, 1852. You know what I'm saying? So my perspective in that case, it's just interesting to see of like, those weren't some of the things for me personally that did. But I think that's interesting about like the betrayal part, man. Like for you, like, was it like you were saying there was more of like
a disconnect?
Like the disconnect of it. Yeah.
You have the character of God here.
Yeah.
And as I'm getting older, it seems like it's almost like the character of God is not what I thought it was.
But the reason why I brought that up was because you're just like, the band never went away.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So,
but like, to me, it's like, yeah, people still act like that, whether they're a member of the church or not. Like now, obviously there's a higher standard, right? But like, I mean, people teach, like, anyway, I can control how I teach my kids. And I don't know, like, racism still exists. I don't care what anybody says. Like, it still exists. Like,
so as far as the history, it still exists. The ban is still up, so to speak, as far as the mindset or the culture. Yeah. Because racism still exists in the culture. So as far as
in the world.
Well, in the world, yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not talking like, I'm just saying like, I'm so used to it, which I like when a lot of stuff happened recently over the past year, I kind of woke up more like, I've kind of been more of like, like, cause I'm a comedian. So like, I'll joke about it. And like a lot of my jokes were kind of therapy for me, you know? And people are like, man, you're always talking about these jokes about this and that. I'm like, man, that really happens to me. Like, that's what really happens. And it's funny because it's true, but sometimes I'm almost like, at what point is there where it's like, yeah, but it shouldn't be true. You know what I'm saying? So it's just as we're having the conversation, man, I'm just thinking like my entire life, man, like I've kind of just dealt with it, you know? And at what point do I kind of just kind of look at it for what it really is? Now I got a great life, man. I ain't been oppressed. You know what I mean? Like I got a lot of blessings, man. I can't complain in that way. But I think if we're trying to make a Zion-like society, I do think there can't be no band that's not there. You know what I mean? And that's not just with race. That's with socioeconomic class, the ability to bullying, all that kind of stuff, man. Like treating people, like expressing ourselves in a way that we truly believe that we're all sons and daughters of God. I think that's so important to really realize, like, I don't know if we can just make it to be just about race. You know, it's got to be about all of it. All of it can't stand if Jesus is going to come back. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we're trying to prepare this place for him to return, man, like, we can't be out this all day. We can't be having anything that's against our neighbor. You know what I mean? Anyway, sorry, I kind of went off the kind of
no worries.
Kind of stepped up on the.
So no, I don't think you went far off there, Stephen. I also wanted to ask. So as far as racism goes, and I really loved your explanation there. It's racism's everywhere, and racism's been around, and racism is still around.
Can I correct that though? What I'm saying is like, I think that we compartmentalize it to just about race when we are so prideful as people in humanity that we are constantly like neglecting people, excluding people, not just with race, like people, what they believe. I think that like, it should be all of that. It's got to be all of that. Because if we're just pinpointing it, this is just my personal perspective, okay? I'm saying like, love your neighbor, love God, love your neighbor, you know? Because for me, and I'm not trying to like, I'm just saying that that's important to realize that I don't think that it's only race. We got to really look at all biases, all prejudice, everything, you know?
Yeah, that's so true. And I also wanted to ask you before I forget is maybe what you feel about the racism. And I really like what you said about all biases, love your neighbor. And that reminds me of Jesus a little bit because that's what he taught a lot. And anyway, you have a really cool story about playing Elijah Abel and how you pictured and you kind of, because you said you kind of did some research because you were going to play this guy.
Yeah.
And anyway, maybe I'll just let you go and talk about that a little bit.
Well, no, because you were saying about how you, when you talk about the history and like your own perspective of like looking back at the history, because I've had similar questions, you know, I've thought about like, well, like what really was it that happened? Like, when did it start? So I would look up more information about like, how did it really start? You know, like what was it that really like happened? Like, was it officially like in general conference? And I look back and I'm like, it was never really officially done in general conference, you know? But like in that process, the fact is that it happened, right? Elijah Abel, he had the priesthood, like he held the Melchizedek priesthood. And so if that's true, which it is true, Q Walker Lewis, he had the Melchizedek priesthood. Brigham Young said that he's one of the finest elders that he said, right? But like, what was it that really like took place that made it an issue and what made things start to change? As we filmed this film, like it's a pretty just straightforward film. It doesn't really try to make it like, oh, Brigham Young's this terrible guy. It's like in the past, the fact is that people were joining the church and many people had slaves. Like they really did. That is really what the truth is, right? When they would send people off to do, like, you think about, okay, the pioneers went on this trail. Like they sent people ahead of them to trailblaze the trail, right? And we just don't have those stories because who's going to write the story? Like that back then, that was pretty much like, that's what happened. That's what people did, you know? And so as I was looking through this, I was like, dang, man, that like for real, like that was really what happened, you know? But then like, as I've thought about it more and I've thought about it even more and more, you got Jane Manning James, who's as president in this film as well. They went through all of these experiences. A big portion of it is, Elijah Abel, for the rest of his life, he continues to petition. And so I'm like, I was trying to figure out like, how am I going to play this role? Like he had to have been maybe like just passionate, but like frustrated, you know, like I've been in, like he was in the temple. He'd received his washing and anointings, but not the endowment because it was just for Kirtland.
Because in Kirtland and in Nauvoo when they started that, that's right.
And I could be wrong on this, he had already performed some baptisms for his own family, but he wanted to continue to do more. That part might be incorrect but I know he'd already performed baptisms in the past and he's already like, gone through all of this. And then now, because when we look at the priesthood ban, you're thinking, okay, he still holds the priesthood, but he now cannot go to the temple. And I'm like, man, like going through like just the different, like, how would that feel? Like you had gone through the temple and now you can't go through the temple, right? Like this is, a saving ordinance. This is a saving ordinance, right? So like, I'm like thinking about all these types of things like that. And I'm thinking like, okay, well, you have to have in the ordinances thereof, the power of godliness is made manifest unto the children of men, right? Moses, he said, I want my people in the same chapter. I want my people to see the face of God and live, right? When he went to the mountain. And in Doctrine and Covenants, the Revelation, it explains more about how that was the true desire of Moses. But you have to go through the temple, those who have gone before, you have to be able to receive your own endowment in order for that to happen. And I'm like, dang, like, but in my own opinion, I'm like, okay, like, I don't really know everything, right? But then I got to the point where I was like, okay, and this is the question that I asked myself. I was like, they stayed in the church. And I was like, dang, I never thought about it like that. You know what I mean? Like even today, members of the church, like COVID, we can't go to now they've opened it, right? But like, and we're like, well, I can't go to the temple every week, right? But it's like these people, like the covenants and the ordinances, like the relationship, the connection with Christ. Like, I really strongly believe that, like, because I asked myself, like, how did they not? Like, how did that not affect them? How did they stay faithful? How did they stay continuing on? I'm not saying like, oh, well, it was easy for them. You know what I mean? I'm saying, how did they do it? And I'm like, maybe it's just like that they like, I just think that question overall is important to ask. Like, they didn't leave. Now, I know that there's probably people who have, for whatever reason, they've decided to make choices for themselves. But I'm saying, as I was playing Elijah Abel, I had to come to the thought of like, they didn't leave. They stayed. And we're going through seeing the history of the things that happened to them, and the ones that we're seeing the disconnect with of the things that happened to them. We're getting flustered over that, but those are the people who actually didn't leave. And I just had never thought that before. I was just like, oh, it's just something that I've just been marinating on. You know what I mean? And so it's really empowered me. It's really strengthened me in that perspective of like, well, like, what is it that caused that to happen? I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
What did it cause it? Because my next question was like, how do you stay faithful? How do you stay faithful? How do you deal with this tough history? How do you, like, I want to stay faithful. And I'm not saying that it's easy to leave.
Yeah, who's saying that?
Yeah, it's not easy to leave.
Yeah.
It's not easy at all to deal with this. So you're stuck with two hard things.
Yeah.
Either way, it's going to be tough.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, because people call it's like a faith crisis, right?
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, that's what faith is. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you knew, it wouldn't be faith, right? And so I'm not saying that, like, I don't know how that'll go with some people, me saying that. But like, the truth is, it's like, for him, in the perspective of him, as I've thought about it, it's like, he had to have had a lot of faith, a lot of trust. Like, if you look back in the Old Testament, you don't see the word faith except like maybe 5 times or less. But the word you do see is trust, 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 trust. And that's the question I'm asking is, what is it that increased his trust? What is it that increased Jane Manning James's trust? What is it that increased Greenflake's trust? These people who like put some blood, sweat, and like legitimate blood, sweat, and tears to help the progress of the church to move forward, the work of the Lord. There had to have been something there that allowed them to stay, you know. And I just thought that was an important thing to look at, you know, as I was trying to portray him, like, you know, because like when you're an actor, you try to like make like a subtext, right? Like, what is it that's underneath it, like that nobody knows about? Like, he had to have been frustrated, you know, like he had this thing and it was gone, and now he wants to be able to do these things, and I think that in that struggle, in that wrestle, he had to have increased his faith in Christ. That's really where I'm trying to get at with that I've come to realize as I've tried to portray that role of him, you know, and to honor him, you know, to honor his struggle, you know.
That's amazing. Now that it's a movie,
yeah,
a feature film. When can we watch it?
So right now,
did you see the premiere already?
I saw the premiere, and it turned out this was on a shoestring, man. Like, it had so many people that came up. Alex Boyer is in it. The Bonner family heavily in it. If you know the Bonner family, Mowley, he's the one who wrote it. Clotilde, all of them. They're all a part of it. A lot of like a Yo-Yo. She's had a huge part in helping out, and so it took a little bit of time. But like, they're gonna do a watch party coming up. But then I know they're in the process of like the distribution and figuring all that with the theaters. The hope that, from what I've heard so far, is that hopefully either in theater or purchase will be Pioneer Day, something like that.
Sweet.
But I'm not.
And what's the title? Do they have a title?
It's called Greenflake. Is the name of Greenflake. Greenflake, yeah. So Greenflake is the historical figure who's the one who was pretty tight with Brigham Young. He's the one who was sent ahead. The majority of the story is their journey through them preparing the way so that they could move across the West. Like, they literally came ahead in the cold, chopping down trees, creating trails so that they could come through a little bit more smoothly. It's a big deal, man. It's a
Cool.
big deal.
I'm excited for it. Pioneer Day, because this episode will probably come out before Pioneer Day.
Yeah.
It definitely will. So, Stephen, I love that we talked about these historic figures. So now what makes me think is how can I deal with it? How have you dealt with it? How can other people deal with this when we see these amazing people who kept their faith in the craziest and hardest of circumstances, probably imaginable? Now, how can I deal with it? How can others deal with it that are struggling really hard? Well, what can we hold on to while trying to navigate through this?
So something that's come up as you're saying that, the first thought that I had as you were saying that just now was from the perspective of like, obviously there's people who are wrestling with this, right? I think that from a reception part of it, I think we're quick to kind of jump on and being like, well, we got so many facts and those are good. But I think that what I've learned so far is that from the reception of like hearing someone who is struggling, like I think that's important to address. And I think that we need to just, in reality, like we just need to shut up and listen. I think like, cause like I've had conversations cause I've studied a lot of it and I'm like, well, and I've like, cause I've had questions and I've studied more and the more facts, which are important. But I think that as people are going through it and they are struggling, I think it would be very helpful for us to just pause and just mourn with those that mourn, comfort those that stand in need of comfort, right? Be a witness of God. That's what I feel like, yeah, like that couldn't have been easy. And just listen, we don't have to have an answer. We don't have to answer someone. We don't have to have a rebuttal. We don't have to have a reason right away to like help somebody understand. I think that would be really helpful. I think that for me personally, or anybody who's like try to wrestle with the thought of it, I think for me myself, you got to get to a point. I think it's helpful to get to a point where it's okay if you don't know yet. Like that's a strong word for me right now. Yet, for anybody, I don't know yet. I don't know yet. I don't know everything yet. I don't have to know everything now yet. You know. I do like. I love that you said that about Christ because, like, you're like, I know his character, but see, that's the thing. I think that like we got to remember. I think that he's not the one we have issue with, right? He's the hero. It's not Brigham. It's not Joseph. It's not any of these people. Like the real hero is Christ. Like there's nothing that anyone could have done. There's nothing that anyone, even Satan you can't mess up his work. You can't mess up the things that he's trying to put into play, that he's trying to put into place. And I think that like, I think we have to remember too, like the covenants, man. I feel like right now we talk so much because like in these conversations, we got to remember Christ. We got to remember the Abrahamic covenant. We got to remember his promises that he has made to the house of Israel. That we got to remember the promises that Christ has connected to us. Because think about it, like who is it that there's so much bad going on in the world right now, 2021, and you could say, well, where's he at? But you think that he can't redeem it? Do you know what I mean? Like we're talking about COVID-19. Why did he let that happen? You think he can't redeem it? You know what I'm saying? Like listen, man, this is like a little bit more personal for me. Like I recently, I'm just trying to decide if I want to tell you. I mean, I already told you, but I got this little wristband on. It's kind of weird. I'm like, should I keep on wearing this thing? This is when I went to the hospital. My wife, we lost our baby, man. We now there's people that it's more severe and it's like relatively like 3.5 months pregnant, man. That's a long time. To me, I don't care what anybody says. Anybody can have their own opinion on it. That's a long time to have a baby. I've seen the heartbeat, man. I've heard the heartbeat. I've heard like the sound. And I remember sitting in that room looking at my wife, like when he was telling us, trying to put the gel on there, he can't find the heartbeat. Like he can redeem that. I believe that. Like, I can't speak for anybody else. I can't speak for other people's experiences. But what I do know, what I do believe is that Jesus Christ, he is powerful, man. I believe that. See, these things are personal to us because like that story of our child, that's a very personal story for me. Somebody that might have a different experience with the history, that's their personal story for them. But what I know about Christ is he's a very intentional, he's a very specific, he's a very intricate God. He's very specific, he's very personal. His love is very personal. His love is very intentional. And so worst case scenario, you can't mess his work up. You can't. And so for us, I'm like for me, like, I don't know how, like, you know, you ever made a mistake, like, man, I don't know how that's gonna work out. You know? And can you imagine him being like, man, they messed up my stuff. But right now in Africa, people are getting baptized left and right. They're getting baptized. I saw this meme. It was funny. Anyway, I don't want to be, it was so funny. It was like, anyway, I don't even want to go to it. But like, I'm telling you, like right now in Africa, the church is growing so fast. And do they know about the history? Many of them do. A lot of them do. But what they're coming to is they're not coming to a church, they're coming to Christ. They're coming to him. They're having experiences with him. I don't know if any of this is helpful, it makes any sense, but like, I can't, like that relationship with him, like I don't know all the other stuff yet, but he's solid, you know?
Can you talk about, I love your take on Jesus and Peter and when they're walking on the water.
When we talking about that? Oh, yeah. Oh,
and
yeah, Peter. Listen, I've always heard that story about Peter walking on the water, right? And that's one of my favorite stories, right? But we don't realize like Jesus was having one of the worst days of his life. Like he just fed the 5,000. He's like, I believe recently, if I'm correct, that was very soon after John the Baptist, his cousin, had passed away. For the 5,000, the apostles are like, hey, no, we're not going to feed you, right? And that's my impression of them. You know, no way. That's the apostles back then. Anyway, but like, he's going to feed the 5,000. He's like, no, let him come. So then they feed him and then they're like, okay, we're going to leave. And Jesus is like, I'm going to go up and I'm going to rest. They get in the middle of the storm. Now, Jesus knows the storm's going to come. How come he doesn't say, don't go in the storm? He could tell them that. He could say, don't know. Hey, apostles, there's going to be a storm coming up. You don't want to get in that storm. He let them go. You think he didn't know? He had to know, right? So they get in the storm. And then we think of like Peter, right? Peter's he's like walking. Oh, yeah, not yet, but like he comes across a storm-filled lake all the way across. We don't think we like know he showed up. And they think it's a ghost. And he's like, he calms everything down. And then what does he say to Peter? No, Peter first says, hey, I want to come to thee. Right?
Well, and this was before the storm had calmed, right?
I don't know. I got to look at the verse by verse. Like I don't have it right in front of me. I don't want to mix that up. But I think the point though is like, Peter walks out to Christ, right? And we look at Peter like, well, Peter walked, that's so nice. He fell, right? Peter fell into, how could he do that, right?
Peter doubted.
Peter doubted, right? Peter fell into the water, bless his heart. You know what I mean? He could have, he looked over and he wasn't focused on Christ. He wasn't focused on Christ. And now this is good stuff. I've thought about it for so long, but then I was talking with my wife. She's a genius, man. She was talking about this and we were talking about this together. And we was like starting to talk. We're like, wait, man, we focused so much on Peter, so much in that. And we focused on the fact that he lost focus on Christ, but wait, like, where was Christ when he fell? Like he could have not let him fall. He walked all the way across that whole lake. He walked all the way across all of that water. And as Peter was falling, he could have not even let him fall. But he let him fall. And what happened when he fell? He was right there to pick it back up. You can't mess this stuff up, man. You can't. Like, the question though is like, well, did they get it wrong? I mean, I like, what does it matter if it's wrong or not? You can't mess it up. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Because you know what I'm saying? Like, because I've thought like, well, if that's wrong, then does that mean that it's all wrong? Right? Does it?
It's a slippery slope.
Does it? Does it?
I think you're gonna say no.
But I'm not saying.
I know.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's easy to think that, right?
Really easy.
Very easy. Yeah.
Really easy.
Why do you think that? Like, I'm just curious from your perspective. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I've thought about that a lot too. You know what I honestly thought?
What?
So when one of the turbines on the wing blew up, which is the race in the Priesthood and Temple band, and the plane was going down. And, you know, you think about that slope too. So if this is wrong, and maybe a few other things that you know or you think that may be wrong. And first off, is it okay to think that they could have been wrong? Is it okay to be in that mindset?
But what does it mean for them to be wrong? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, why is it like what is like? I'm saying like, what does that mean that they're wrong? I'm sincerely asking. You know what I'm saying?
Were they wrong about the priesthood ban? Was it of God?
So if you look at the history, we know.
Yeah.
Like, I think that in the now, we have to realize that it was never a declaration at a pulpit.
Right.
It was not. We have to be. I think that is the fact that we have to look at, that is what is true, right? And as you continue to go through the history, right, we know that there were people who had the priesthood, okay? Like, that's true. Like, we know it, okay? So, all right, now, as things happen, the history, man, like, you got, like, the Smith family, that's their real family. They're like, hey, guys, let me share this document with you. Like, we have all these historical facts of things that are, like, that we're not really happy about, but, like, here, read it right now. Read my journal. You know what I mean? That was his family journal. You got me? Like, which Smith was it? Was it, I can't remember the exact Smith. There's so many, just Joseph Smith Sr. I'd have to look up the actual, it was an early historian. Like, think about even Elder Ballard. That's like his family. It's not that far back, right? But like the early family, they were alive. They remember when all of it happened. And that's their journals, man. Like the Joseph Smith papers, that was his dad's. Like, you're talking like grandpa, uncle, that was their journals, you know? And they're like, hey, here's my journal, read it. They didn't, come on, that didn't happen, right? Anyway, that was random. That's it.
No, I mean,
but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, exactly. And as I thought of that slippery slope thing as I thought of that, if this is wrong, is everything wrong? And one thing seemed to catch me from falling down that slope.
What was it?
The Book of Mormon, man. The most unlikely thing that I thought would be but for some reason, somewhere like deep inside, like that stopped me from going all the way, because I was like, wait, this might be wrong. I have a problem with this. I have a problem with this. I have a problem with this. Like, but I know the Book of Mormon's true, you know, and I want to believe that Jesus is my savior, that Jesus is the hero of the story, that he'll save and redeem. Man, I want to believe that.
That book right there,
and man. That's what's kept me. And throughout this little journey that I've gone through, you know, that's been on display a little bit, I feel like I'm coming to know to believe that more. I still feel like I'm in a space where I'm saying I want to believe, rather than saying I believe this is true or I know this is true. I think I'm still at that spot where I can only say I want to believe.
Yeah, man. Look, because when you say the Book of Mormon, like, that's like as I've read the Book of Mormon, man, like every single word almost is about Christ, man. And like a lot of conversations that I've had, like, he's not really in the conversation, man. Like I don't know what it is. What is it that you like about it? Like, what
the Book of Mormon?
Yeah. What I'm saying, like, for overall, because a lot of people focus on it, and like, because some people would be like, but the Book of Mormon is my thing, right? But like, what is it about the Book of Mormon for you? Like, so like for me, like the Book of Mormon, like, especially looking at it from the perspective of the house of Israel, like the Abrahamic covenant, like, I'm just like, if I study looking for the Abrahamic covenant, like President Nelson said this last conference, I'm like, man, like, this is so much more simple but complex in its depth more than I've ever realized over the past year or so as I've studied it. But I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that you notice?
Well, I know that several years ago, I had an experience in my a few years ago. I can't quite pinpoint when. If I thought about it a lot, I probably could, and I was really struggling because I felt like I hadn't had a testimony of the Book of Mormon. And I felt like, how could I know this is true? How can I testify of this? How can I help other people see the Book of Mormon as the Word of God? And I just had this experience. I couldn't say it was one particular moment. I prayed and I got this manifestation or this vision or this words in my heart or this feeling, but it was mainly just this experience that spanned, I don't know how long, that spoke to the truth of it. And every time I read it was helping me either draw closer to Christ, think about Christ more. It helped me try to have a better relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
It made me feel the Spirit most of the times I read it. And that was the base. And as I kind of let that sit a little bit, now I'm thinking I'm going to get caught by that Alma 30, whatever scripture talking about. If you don't believe, then want to believe and let that work in you. And it looks like I'm playing right into the hands of the scriptures. I feel like that's not
got me. You got me.
I feel like that's not the first time that's happened on this show, even where the scriptures got me. But I feel like that's because I can't go on and talk about a miraculous conversion story about the Book of Mormon. But from that experience of letting that work in me a little bit, and maybe what you said is pause rather than go crazy and be like, I don't have a testimony of the Book of Mormon. Like, why am I even a part of all of this? It's, why am I trying so hard? And instead, and I probably have to attribute this to my dad, just pausing and letting that sit and work in me a little bit. And so from that experience on, I feel like the Book of Mormon is almost this untouchable evidence that the restoration of the gospel has happened in the latter days. And I think that's what gets me, is that
that's interesting.
And I could talk about Christ and coming closer to Christ, and the book is all about Christ, which is all true and I agree with and I believe in. But I feel like that's what really gets me, is like God's evidence to all of us that he restored the gospel and he still deals with us. Anyway, kind of a long-winded answer. I really wanted to give you a concise, good answer, but I feel like I have to figure out whenever I am confronted with that question, or whenever I'm thinking about it, I have to figure out sometimes, because it's not always easy to have it ready to answer. Like, I would love to be like, Stephen, this is my answer. Look how spiritual and profound and amazing it is. And I feel like I have to figure it out every time. Is that bad?
Well, any friend that you have, you don't have to explain your relationship with them, because that's what I've come to find. Like when I think of like, we like separate it like it's this book that's like this, that's the book here, that's the book here. And like, man, this is his words, man, through his prophets. Like, they weren't perfect people, man. You know what I mean? You think that Lehi never got upset with this kid? Like, Lehi wasn't a perfect guy. Like, he was not. No way. Right? But man, Jesus, he's, man, in that book right there. Like, man, you can see him so clear if you look for him, man. I think that when I was a kid, for sure, when I used to think about the scriptures, I would think more of like it's the scriptures, and I read the scriptures, right? And I read the words from the book of the scriptures. But like, the older that I get, I've started to change it of like, I'm trying to connect with them. And like when I, like the way, reading period, not even just the scriptures. When I read, it changes the way I think. You know what I mean? And when I think differently, it changes the way who I am. You know what I mean? And you know the pattern of like what it is. I feel like it's the same as the whole thing with Alma. Like, the seed, to me, he says the seed is not faith. The seed is his word. If you plant his word, it's not faith. Like, faith is like a little seed. If you plant it, it will grow. No, it ain't, man. It's the word is the seed, right? Like, I don't know who wrote the song. I'm not even hating on him, right? But the word of God is the seed, man. And the book is his words. Literally, it's the stories, but like there's oftentimes where he's talking, and he's like all third Nephi, man. That's hands down. That just it's so beautiful, man. And look, man, Isaiah in the Book of Mormon to me is like so important because it establishes the covenant. It establishes the Abrahamic covenant. Well, you can say copied whatever you want. Joseph Smith, even if he copied it straight from the New Testament, it needs to be in there because wherever it came from, it establishes the covenant. It's not some random Isaiah, like Isaiah's just like, hey, let me just do some parallelism. Like he's like, no, this is the covenant. I am real. I am a God that don't leave his people hanging. And the ultimate end, we live in a world where people have choices, but no matter what, I save my people. I redeem my people. I come back for my people. In the third and fourth generation, I will come back. It's the greatest love story of all time. You know what I mean? Like people, if you were married or if you were in a relationship and somebody cheated on you, I don't know how many times, how long would it take? How long would it take before you're like, I'm done? Him, he's like, let me give him another chance. Let me see if there's something more I can do with my vineyard. Let me try it again. Because if they're willing to make a commitment with me, then I'm gonna give them some more time. I'm gonna be merciful. I'm gonna try to help them out. That's what that book talks about. That's my book, man. You can't say I don't know, man. Like I'm reluctant to say this, man, because I know anyway. I don't want to say that. Like, like, look for me. Like I don't like. Should I say this? Like, I know people have issues of whatever he translated it with. I don't care if he translated with the paper. Like I had a friend, this is a friend of mine said this, and I agree. Like, I don't care if he translated with the paper towel roll. I don't care what it was. That's a great, Dan, the words in that thing, shoot, that's the real stuff, man. Anyway.
Well, we did an episode with Brian Hales.
Yeah.
Talking about, and he prefaced all of it, right? He says, okay, we need to have faith in the Book of Mormon, right? But look at all this cool, amazing stuff that is more of like an intellectual support and evidence to why the Book of Mormon is like the craziest, most awesome, and why the Book of Mormon is seriously a phenomenon.
There's no way Joseph Smith wrote that book, man. No way.
So hopefully any of our listeners or viewers can watch that. And
that episode?
That episode. And we also provided the PDF of his research in that. He did like 5 years of research on this thing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So I do appreciate those moments where I can look and see, wow, it just makes sense that the Book of Mormon's true. Outside of all this amazing stuff that you just illustrated. It's just cool, like the witnesses, the witness testimonies.
None of them,
all of this evidence,
left, and none of them denied it, man.
None of them denied it.
Not one.
No. And that was interesting because that was one of when we started this podcast, I thought, oh, we have to do an episode about the witnesses, and we did do like a story episode about the witnesses. The fact that thinking that if I chose that other hard route, right? We talked about 2 really tough routes. Try to leave and figure things out, or try to stay and figure things out, right? And I feel like if I left to try to figure things out, I couldn't deny my testimony of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
So that story really resonated with me.
That's my book, man. Listen, like I know we're talking a lot about the Book of Mormon, but I think that this is really the foundational of it, man. Like the truths that it teaches that are just simple too, man. Like it has to be witnessed that because the Bible is true. But we need an assurance because think about how much we've been even saying now. We crave assurance, and there you go. Boom. That he is the real deal, that he does keep his promises, that he does keep his commitments. We need that. And I don't know, like the translation. Do you know today, I was watching this, I'm trying to remember where I found this out. Oh, the person is above the translation department of like the Book of Mormon now. Like they're still doing translations. Do you know how long it takes to translate like a Book of Mormon into a new language from start to finish of like research? And do you know how long it takes? It takes 7 years. Whoa. Which if you think from start to finish, from the first time he came to Joseph Smith, from when he was 14, all the preparation that goes into place. And then, the days he translated it were very short, like 90 days or less, right? The actual translation
as
days.
few as like 55 or 57.
Yeah.
As few as.
But today, translating the Book of Mormon that's already been translated
with a team.
I'm sure with a team.
A substantial team. I don't know. Maybe one person sitting in some office somewhere, but I assume it's a team. 7 years. I didn't know that.
7, roughly. I mean, it's not perfectly 7 years, but it's ironically the same amount of time.
More than 55 days, probably?
Well, what I'm saying, when God prepares the way, Joseph Smith, think about the progression of Joseph Smith.
The first time he saw the plates or the first vision. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's a cool way to look about it.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Anyway, man, I'm with you on the Book of Mormon, man.
Book of Mormon. Book of Mormon for the win, man.
But my dad's the same way. My dad...
you'd say that you can't tell him the church isn't true.
But what I'm saying is you can't, because look, my dad, he joined in 1979, and people they didn't home teach with him. People wouldn't, but he learned how to read. My dad, I remember as a kid, when I was in high school, I would write checks for my dad. In the grocery store, right? He played football. He never really learned to read, man. But he went to jail, and I'm not trying to bash on my dad at all, but my dad's a pioneer, man. You can't say nothing about him, right? He learned to read by going to the public library and bringing his Book of Mormon. That's what's up, man. That book right there, my dad to this day, now that you can listen to it, he can read. But he's always like, man, I was listening to the scriptures, man. Miles, man, that's the book, man. You can't tell him. You cannot tell my dad that all this stuff. My dad's gone through a lot of stuff in the church, with racial stuff. But he's like that. You can't, because he loves the Book of Mormon, and and he's ingrained that in me, man. He's ingrained in me just the work ethic, of not trying to, he's so faithful. He's loyal, but not just for loyal sake. He's been knocked down, but he can see the difference between who Christ is versus just people, That's what, and I feel like he ingrained that in me a lot. So.
Well, I wish that we could talk for a few more hours.
We've been
going
hours?
for a little while. But before we end, you've talked about a meme that you want to make.
No, when I was telling you before, what was it saying to you?
Where you have a picture of,
so before we were filming this, we were just kind of chatting, and I was telling you about how because a lot of times we think because a question that's not even about the priesthood, but just in life, man, why do bad things happen to good people? Don't we either think this? How can God allow all of these horrific things to happen? And then one day I was sitting and I was like, oh my gosh, I could just have this visual of a picture, kind of like a meme, but it wouldn't be a meme because it's not like a joke, of Christ on the cross, right? And the phrase that would be on the top of it, there's two of them that came to my mind. Number one was just that phrase, why do bad things happen to good people? And then the second one was love is a verb. Love is a verb. He proved who he was with what he did. And he's like, look. That's the reason why he came. Because he knew that we're not perfect. He knew we'd mess up. That doesn't justify any of it. But that's why he's the Redeemer. That's why he's not, his last name isn't Christ. He is the Christ. He is the anointed. He is the one who came to save us all. Whoever will decide to come to him, whoever will choose to come back to him. And again, you can't mess his work up.
And I want to just end on that, Stephen. I thank you for coming on. What an amazing conversation. And we really hope it helps all of you out there. Hopefully you can relate. Subscribe to us on YouTube and watch out for these wherever you find your podcasts. And anything else you want to say, Stephen?
I'll just say I can't speak for everybody. I know that this isn't going to really mess with everybody, but we all got to figure stuff out for ourselves. And I would just emphasize that idea of listening. Just, we're in a time right now, so many people, mourning. You don't have to understand why people are mourning to mourn with them. Like, to me, this is something that I thought of, man. Like, when we went through all of this with this baby, I came to this conclusion that pain is pain. Like, you may have not, you may be a woman who's never had a miscarriage, and our family, we just went through that, right? But nobody, like, not everybody's experienced that. What I've seen, though, is the people who have are a little bit more empathetic. But what I realized, though, I was like, you know what? From now on, I don't need to know. I don't need to have experienced it. I know what pain's like. And pain is pain. Like, if you've experienced pain, I've experienced pain. I know what pain is. And so I'm with you. You know what I mean? So I think that's what I would add.